Welcome back to Amateurs, the podcast. This is a mini episode where we focused on the basketball in the Summer Olympics. And it was a heck of a tournament.
For sure. I'm Logan.
I'm Rhett.
And so in this episode, like you said, Olympics, we're going to go over some guys who weren't on our radars. Mm-hmm. We did an Olympic preview going over some notable players in each country. And there were some guys that really stood out that weren't on anybody's radars. Some teams that impressed, and we're also going to the women's side as well.
We are. That's where I want to start. The women have been a dominant force, and watching some of the games, you can see there's such a gulf, a chasm between the U.S. women and everyone else.
Well, I mean, it's kind of like with women's basketball gaining popularity, it's 30 years behind in the sense of it global.
Yeah.
And I saw a stat. If you're 31 years or under, you have never seen them lose an Olympic game,
right?
Which is just ridiculously dominant.
Though they came close.
Very.
In France, you have to understand, they have 3 WNBA players. Those 3 players opted not to play the first half of the season.
Crazy.
Instead, to prepare with their home team. It was at home.
Yeah.
And the U.S. squad, I got to tell you, we talked a little bit about roster construction from a branding standpoint, Clark and Reese, but you saw some of the people out there and you had to wonder why. And I'm going to start with, Taurasi, it was clear that while she can still play, she's not one of the premier athletes, and this was done as a legacy builder.
Yeah.
She sat
most of the games.
Late. Well, she started in the beginning, and then Reeve ushered her out. Alyssa Thomas, who played well in stretches, was playing with 2 torn labrums.
That's crazy.
So she's not going to get surgery until after the season. But was there not another player of her caliber available? There were times I thought Reeve stuck with Collier, the ex-UConn standout, and she's a standout in the WNBA, and she had good games in the very end. But I was just not sure why she started and why she stuck with her. And then you have to look at Sabrina Ionescu, the closest thing the WNBA has to Steph Curry.
Mm-hmm. And
she, A, was coming off the bench fine, but B, barely played in certain games. And she is top 5 or top 6 in the WNBA in scoring and top 5 in assists. I think she's second among players that played. Very surprising. And you also saw kind of Chelsea Gray on the downside. To her credit, Reeve adjusted late in the tournament, played Gray less, played Jackie Young a lot more, which was inspired. The French team of the 3 WNBA players, Gabby Williams, she's a star.
Mm-hmm.
And she played like a star, and she did her home country very proud. But for a step.
Yeah, KD type stuff.
Yeah, we might be talking about a different result. That leads me into, I am starting to become of the opinion firmly, especially on the women's side, it should not be a current WNBA coach. Whether it should be a college coach, I don't know. But I thought Reeve, one, was pretty clear when she made the statement early in the season that was directed at Clark, that was a reason Clark wasn't selected. And I think that's a problem. You also tend to stick with certain players because of your team loyalty or college loyalty or whatever it is. Steve Kerr is not immune from that either.
No, there were some very questionable coaching decisions made by him. However, the guys he played their butt off.
Yeah, I think...
Just his rotations questionable.
I think the 2 biggest issues there are, early in the tournament, he stuck with Steph too much. And now it paid off in the end. So it's hard to... Was he getting into shape or not? But obviously the Jason Tatum situation.
Here's the deal with Tatum. That would require Booker to play less, and Booker was perfect in his role. I mean, I don't know who you would play Tatum over. Granted, he probably shouldn't have had any DNPs. But I think, like, Booker's the clear guy who Tatum, and Booker was fantastic in his role.
Yeah, I mean, maybe you don't start Drew Holiday. I thought...
Yeah, the starting lineups didn't really matter.
No.
Because you know who was ending every game.
Right, and that was pretty clear. What was revealing throughout the tournament was there were several players that do not look healthy. We knew Joel Embiid coming into the Olympics was hurt.
Mm-hmm.
And it showed in the exhibition season, the first few games. He got up for Serbia, to his credit.
Yeah,
played an excellent game. But he was not fully healthy.
Mm-hmm.
Drew Holiday didn't look...
He had some issues, yeah.
And Ant-Man...
Yeah, I hear you, but Ant also, like... He didn't look healthy in spurts, but I mean, then he had a crazy windmill dunk, and it's like...
Yeah, but I saw another dunk where he was barely getting it above the rim, and there was no push.
Yeah.
Now, whether that was Kerr saying, we're going to go half court, which would surprise me, because LeBron was always looking to hit ahead.
Mm-hmm.
Ant just didn't look explosive.
Yeah.
And another player, two other players, there's something wrong with Rudy Gobert.
I think it's just confidence, and I mean, we've seen him get benched in the playoffs before, and this was essentially playoffs. I mean, yeah, it was very surprising for France to sit probably their most accomplished player.
Yeah.
But it worked.
It worked. And you know, the other guy I'm going to call out who's definitely not healthy, Canada's Jamal Murray.
Is he not healthy, or is it just not May?
It might be a combination. He just didn't look explosive,
No.
didn't look like his legs were under him.
And he bears a good amount of the brunt of blame for Canada going out so early. I mean, he's the clear number 2. Shea played a great game.
And RJ Barrett.
But Jamal Murray, he's an all-star. He's got to step up in those moments. And if he is hurt, then he shouldn't have been out there.
Yeah, and that leads me to 3 of the biggest surprises. Not player.
Team surprises?
Well, there's one player in there,
Okay.
but more on the disappointing side.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you know who I'm going to go. Obviously, we talked about Gobert,
Well, Canada,
and Germany.
yeah, even though they made it to the bronze medal game, but coming off that FIBA high, being the world champs.
I mean, they handled France in group play.
Mm-hmm.
Handled it. It really motivated the French. Unfortunately for the rest of the world, but Germany looked phenomenal through the group stage. I don't think they lost, and then you get to
Semifinal game.
game.
What the play that keeps running through my head for Germany is Franz Wagner not calling a timeout and falling out of bounds. I understand in the moment, he's concerned about getting the ball, but someone's got to call a timeout there.
We disagree on that because I thought he just didn't have time to call timeout.
He took like 3 dribbles.
Well, it was a stumble, and he
had possession of the ball because he was dribbling the ball.
He did.
That cost him the game. 13 seconds left or so. They were down, I think, 2.
Yeah. Unfortunately, so those were in Canada.
Yeah, we talked about Canada a little bit.
I mean, there's been some speculation. Had they had Zach Edey,
I just think a team that talented, and we do have to say, in that quarterfinal game against France, there was some heavy home cooking.
Oh yeah.
And they did make a push at the end.
Semis, right?
Quarterfinal. They didn't make the bronze medal game.
Oh, right.
And it's also
Germany made the.
I'm talking about Canada versus
Canada,
France.
My bad. Yes, there was a lot of home cooking. Yes.
Canada versus France. I mean, it's a bad luck of the draw. Those are probably the top 2 teams outside the U.S. in the quarterfinal game. But I mean, a team with that many NBA players who are all good NBA players to not come home with a medal is disappointing.
Yeah.
And also with a star like Shea.
Yep. RJ Barrett did play well, but if you don't have a third option, and they were counting on Jamal Murray, and he wasn't there.
Yep.
So it leads into, I have a top 10 player list.
Performers, you would say?
Performers.
Okay.
I'm going to run through it, and you tell me if you agree, disagree.
Just on the top 10. All right.
Obviously, LeBron and Steph. LeBron was voted the MVP.
And Steph could have been voted the MVP.
Yeah. For sure. Jokic did nothing to tarnish his legacy. He's a warrior. Not a warrior. He's a nugget. But, Victor.
Yeah. I mean, he had some games where he wasn't, but he also had games where he was. So
I think he averaged close to 20. He was one of the leading scorers.
Yeah, I have no problems with that. For sure.
That move to put the hezzy on
the dunk.
Yeah.
On AD was disgusting.
Embiid. No, was it
on AD?
Was it on the AD?
And then he also made that sick pass out of the post.
Yeah.
I mean, he's so talented.
Yeah. And then his teammate Yabusele.
Yabusele for sure. We've been saying I think he needs to get another NBA look, especially like some monster performances, monster highlights.
Yep.
You know, if you know, you know.
Right. Yeah. I do think he's earned a look.
For sure.
Another guy who's possibly earned a look is Brazil's Bruno Caboclo.
Yeah.
Now, I could be murdering his last name,
how
Caboclo. But he averaged 17 and 7, had a huge game against the U.S., and he's a guy who
has been in the NBA before.
Yeah, but I think he's matured.
Yeah.
I think someone said about him he got drafted 4 years too early.
Yeah, 2 years from being 2 years away.
Yeah. Franz Wagner, despite that stumble at the end, was ridiculously good.
Uh-huh.
We can argue, and then Barrett and SGA, and I would throw KD in there. KD,
Is that the top 10?
That's the top 10.
I would like to give a shout out. I know you have Courtenay from France.
Yep.
He had some really good moments. Championship game, did not have a great game, which hurt his numbers in a 7-game tournament. You know, one stinker is going to hurt your numbers, but he was on some MVP polls, and I would argue that up until that championship game, you could have argued he was the second best player on France, tied with Yabusele. He really impressed me. He should get a look in my eyes.
Yeah, I can understand that. So another probably honorable mention here goes to Japan's 5'8", 5'7", 5'5", 5'6" point guard Yuki Kawamura.
Yeah.
And he was just ridiculous at times, ran out of steam, and when they almost upset France.
Yeah.
There were a couple surprises. We talked about Courtinier, we talked about Yabusele, Bruno, a couple other Hawkinson
From Japan.
for Japan. Just a shame he's 29, but he showed a very complete sort of stretch 4 game. And then
Nicolo from France was pretty impressive.
DeColo was impressive, and 2 other Carlik Jones.
South Sudan, yeah. We've talked about him on our Olympics preview.
He's a little undersized.
G League MVP.
But it would not surprise me to see him get into camp. And then the last thing that was a surprise to me was Josh Giddey shooting the ball.
He had a really good tournament.
Yes.
Best player in that Australia team by far.
So we're going to go to LA in 4 years. Maybe.
We got to be there, man.
I mean, Spotify will send us them.
Yeah.
But
we'll have a live show in LA. Book it 4 years from now.
When our roster will be scary. Not scary good. Scary.
Yes. When the time comes, we'll do a LA 2028 preview.
Yeah. We might have to do a mid cycle.
2026 after FIBA, because France is looking scary.
Yeah.
That was our Olympics recap. A little mini episode. If you disagree, let us know in the comments. You like the video? Like the video. If you dislike the video, dislike the video. Any interaction is interaction for us. And yeah, we'll see y'all next week. Peace.